Welcome to the Ventura County Climate Emergency Council. Today is April 19th. We're just waiting a moment or two until we get a few more people in our digital room, and then we'll be starting this meeting. Chair Schnapp, I just got a message from Keith Garola. He is either not going to be able to join or he will be joining late.
Okay, all right. So as we have a quorum, we can go ahead and start then. All right, very good. So welcome to the Ventura County Climate Emergency Council regular meeting. It is Tuesday, April the 19th, 2022 at 12 and some minutes here past. Let's go ahead and start the meeting. The special notice is that in response to the declared state and local emergencies due to the novel coronavirus and limited public access to the Hall of Administration, consistent with the Governor's Executive Order N-29-20, this Ventura County Climate Emergency Council meeting will be conducted via Zoom and telephonically. And let's go ahead and have a roll call, please, Clay.
Okay. One short announcement before we start the roll call. Councilmember Ontiveros, the representative for the El Rio del Norte community, has resigned from the Climate Emergency Council earlier this month, and so she will not be joining us, and her seat is now marked as vacant, unfortunately. But as staff, I wanted to express that we're really appreciative for the time that she spent on the Climate Emergency Council and everything she put into it. And with that, we'll go ahead and start. So let's go ahead and start with that. And Councilmember White.
I'm here.
Councilmember Ferris.
Here.
Chair Schnapp.
Here.
Councilmember Kessley.
Here.
Councilmember Ramirez.
Here.
Councilmember Garola. He indicated that he would either not be attending or would be late. Vice Chair Chavez.
Here, thank you.
And Councilmember Baldwin.
Here.
Thank you. With that, we have a quorum.
Great.
And if you didn't get mine, I think I came out and then came back.
Oh. Councilmember Ferris, I have you marked as present.
All right, great, thank you. Let's go ahead to item number 3 on the agenda. Councilmember Ramirez, would you lead us through the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sure.
Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
Flag
of the
of the United States of America,
and to the
to the
republic
republic
of which
for
it
which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with liberty
and
and
justice
justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, so let's move on to item number 4, the approval of minutes from our March 15th, 2022 meeting. Is there, I'll entertain a motion.
Chavez moves.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second.
That was second by Councilmember Kessley. Okay, thank you. All right, so can we have a roll call, please, for the vote? Oh, you're on mute.
Yes, we can. So I'll go ahead and start with that. Councilmember White.
Yes.
Councilmember Ferris.
Yes.
Chair Schnapp.
Yes.
Councilmember Kessley.
Yes.
Councilmember Ramirez.
Yes.
Councilmember Garola is not here. Vice Chair Chavez
Aye.
and Councilmember Baldwin.
Yes,
All right, motion passes. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to item number 5 on the agenda, public comments for items not on the agenda. And I understand that we didn't get anything prior to the meeting. And so is there anyone then in attendance who would like to make a comment on items that we won't be discussing today? So you can take yourself off of mute or raise your hand. I'll go through and see if there's anyone who would like to speak. I don't see anyone on the screen.
Do not see anyone with a hand raised or indicating they would like to speak.
Okay, so then we move on to correspondence agenda, and we have items 6 through 13 identified as that. And Clay, we didn't have anybody who'd like to speak individually about one of the items. Right?
No one has indicated they have would like to speak based on the correspondence that's been submitted, and staff has no comments on the correspondence that was circulated by staff.
Okay, great, thank you. And then with that, let's move on to item number 14 that starts the regular agenda. And that is the resolution authorizing remote teleconference meetings for this organization, the Climate Emergency Council, for a 30-day period pursuant to Government Code Section 54953, Subdivision E of the Ralph M. Brown Act.
So from staff, there's been no change in this. This is the same sort of agenda item, a subsequent authorization for this resolution that you've received for the last few months. And so there's nothing new about this other than it needs to be renewed.
And it needs to be renewed every 30 days, right?
Every 30 days.
Yeah, okay. So I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move.
Okay, thank you. Moved by Councilmember Baldwin. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Kesley seconds. Roll call, please, Clay.
Councilmember White,
Yes.
Councilmember Ferris,
Yes.
Chair Schnapp,
Yes.
Councilmember Kesley,
Yes.
Councilmember Ramirez,
Yes.
Councilmember Guerrero is still not present, and Councilmember Chavez,
Aye.
or Chair Chavez, sorry, and Councilmember Baldwin.
Did you call my name?
Yes, Councilmember Baldwin.
Well, you froze for a moment, so
Oh, thank you.
I'll say yes.
Thank you, sir. And that passes. Thank you.
Okay, super. Thank you. Let's move on to item number 15, and this was update from County Executive Office. So Clay, take it away.
Sure. So just a few items to touch on. So one, there were no official TAC meetings with various TACs. Staff did provide input for the other issues TAC on some items that they had asked for input on. And those are items that are coming up on the agenda later today. Although we're still working with doing communications with the agriculture TAC to get them connected with specifically Agrimin and some conversations that staff was asked to move forward with. So we've kind of done some introductions and expecting a meeting with them on agriculture and agricultural waste reuse. So some of those issues that were initially talked about. I wanted to make an additional announcement about the carbon sequestration webinar series that staff in the sustainability division is organizing. I think there are already a couple of council members that are involved in that, but there is a carbon sequestration webinar series that was part of the correspondence agenda, and that it's a regional focus. And if folks are interested in carbon markets, in working landscapes, or in carbon sequestration in general, it would be a good opportunity. So just putting that back out there again. And then the last item that I wanted to mention was that this month I received a number of different phone calls from different individuals, and it was from Climate Emergency Council members basically talking about and expressing concerns or frustration on different aspects of how things are proceeding in this council. And I just wanted to share those because they came from different individuals with slightly different perspective, but there were some common themes to them. So one, I wanted to let the council know that there was some frustration just on general behavior and the way that discussions are proceeding, and that there seems to be a desire, from what I heard from multiple people, for it just to go more smoothly, for people to feel like they're being heard. And so one of the things that I would just remind folks, the typical sequencing that we would anticipate seeing in public hearings would be that your council is often receiving information from an individual or a speaker or one of your fellow council members. Then you would typically expect to see clarifying questions asked. Then the public gets an opportunity to comment. And then that essentially closes the public hearing portion of that agenda item as you move into the council member discussion, which is really where you get to dialogue with one another and then take an action. There are certain things you can, the council members can do that don't necessarily follow that exact sequence, but that is how we would typically expect to see it at a lot of public hearings. And so I just wanted to put that in mind based on some of the frustrations that I heard from individuals over the course of the last month. The other item that we heard were individuals that expressed frustration with tax and how the tax are functioning and how information is coming from the temporary advisory committees. So I don't know that there's necessarily a problem with tax in and of themselves, but some of the things that we heard, or that I heard specifically, were that there was a feeling that some of the tax were operating outside of the agreed scope of work that was agreed on when they were formed. That some of those actions might have even been outside of the allowable actions for tax as part of the Ventura County Climate Emergency Council. And so there was an expression of concern about, are we sticking to the Brown Act? Are we complying with it substantially? And then there is another item, which is basically concern that the tax, if they're not operating correctly, could be stifling the ability of the Climate Emergency Council to have open dialogue and able to have open discussion about a variety of topics or explore those topics without stepping on one another's feet. So now all of that is paraphrasing because it's coming from a number of sources. So if you feel like one of those was your concerns, but that's not the way you intended it, then I apologize. But that is more or less what I've heard, as I've heard from a number of folks over the last month or so.
Hey, are there any questions for Clay? So I know that we have county counsel here to help us if there were any questions that anyone had. I know that the concerns were raised and it was more so with the temporary TAC that was established. We felt that, well, I shouldn't say we, but some of the concerns came from that perhaps it should be, it's a temporary and it's not a standing committee, but it's more of designed to be an ad hoc. And I believe that was addressed within the bylaws of creating this climate emergency council. So I believe that as a group, we probably should put it on a future agenda item in order to discuss how we're going to proceed forward with that. Could be that the temporary advisory is dissolved because it's not supposed to be a standing committee like the others are. It's more of an ad hoc. It just stands for a certain aspect and then it closes down. So, County Counsel, Jeff, do you want to make any comments here following Clay's presentation?
Yeah, thank you so much, Chair. I don't think now would be the best time to get into the specific issues on this agenda item. I noticed on your agenda, I think the next item is about the temporary advisory committee, so that might be more appropriate, just to kind of track the agenda. But I think under the Brown Act, it would be appropriate for me to comment at that point as opposed to this item.
Very good, thank you. And I see that Vice Chair Chavez, do you have your hand up?
I did, but I'm going to save those questions for the next item as was mentioned by our county counsel. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, very good. Clay, is there anything else that you'd like to add here?
No, that's it for the report from staff.
Okay. Any other questions from the committee? All right. So let's move on then to item number 16. We have a statement from Councilmember Ferris regarding the temporary advisory committees. So go ahead, Councilmember Ferris.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Schnapp. I think that you rightly signaled, I think a lot of the things that we were already thinking about, and this is probably the right time in the agenda. I think in the last meeting we had, I think the expressions were, frustrations were expressed about the ability for us to do the work that we need to do and bring it to the council in a collaborative way, and making sure that we're having the inputs from a variety of perspectives incorporated, and that we can then actually make the right decisions without there being a pall of some other perceived implicit motivations, which I think we just need to figure out a way to get past. But I would say is structurally, because of the way that the bylaws say, if you are a member of a TAC, you can only be on one. And that when we set them up, that there was sort of an expectation that they would go and do their business and bring it back to the council so that we could act and use that ability to be able to pursue other areas that we want to get work done and bring it to our attention. And what's happened so far is, I would say, with the exception of the evaluation criteria TAC, which we've done our work and we're done, the other three, all of them are sort of acting as standing. And there has been some of them where there's been nothing brought back, with the exception of Councilmember Baldwin brought something that wasn't related to transportation to the council. And Councilmember White has been active in providing other items that they're working on. And I think that what we need to make sure of is, how do we provide as a council direction to say, let's go look at this and bring it back, yet also ensure that we do not stifle the ability of someone to investigate on their own, or have the ability to give the opportunity to go and do some work and bring it back if a majority of the council doesn't agree with it. I've been on deliberative bodies to where the majority sometimes uses that ability to quash research into areas, and I absolutely do not want that to happen here. So I would be open to making sure that we kind of get back to that, the tax being truly a working item, to go and do some research and bring it back with an expectation of, with that proposal, that the council provides feedback, maybe they go back, they follow up with that research and then bring it back for final action. I think with it, hopefully there can be no expectation that if we go and do something, we bring it here, that there will be no ability to kind of flesh it out and really make it a solid proposal, because we want our recommendations to be well received by the Planning Commission and the board as they go forward. So I just want to make sure that we're giving ourselves the best opportunity to work well, to give everybody the opportunity to dig into issues that they think can be helpful for the mission of this emergency council, and that we can work together to end up doing that, even if in the final vote we may not all agree when the final vote happens. So that's just what I wanted to bring up to the attention of the council.
All right, thank you so much, Councilmember Ferris. Let's go to public comments. Are there any public comments? So anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item, you can either raise your hand or take yourself off of mute. I don't see anyone at this time.
Staff does not see any either.
Okay, so let's open it up for comments from council members. Any comments, questions? Well, I do want to say one thing. Councilmember Ferris, thank you for bringing it up. I know that I've expressed a couple of times in the past about how the other issues TAC had proceeded. And so I questioned that more than once over the course of the last year or so, since we have them, we had established them, the TACs. And I know, as I've served on the city council for Port Hueneme and was mayor there for several terms in my 12 years of service there, I had seen that we had only once experienced on that service what I have seen here repeatedly. And so I didn't necessarily feel that I could, that I needed just to go through these meetings, but also certainly I felt very suppressed in terms of what could be said. And without pointing any fingers, I didn't want to express those concerns, but I know that I just had felt that there were many more things that could be established, but also too, knowing that there needed to be a decorum that I had seen here that was not familiar with my service on the city council. So I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you so much.
Can I offer
yes.
a follow-up just as part of this? I want to be really careful about placing blame anywhere on this. We are all here to end up serving a greater mission of being able to provide well thought out proposals for action by our board. And I think that we really need, everybody has a very valuable perspective, and that we need to honor that understanding of what they're doing. And the fact is that if anyone has any particular points of saying, well, I didn't like the way this particular TAC functioned, it's a combination of the fact that other members are on other TACs and they're not providing any information to the council to do any work. So because they're on a TAC, they can't be on another one. If there are 4 people conversing within a TAC, no other member of the council can actually be part of that conversation. Otherwise, it's a Brown Act thing. So you have these multi-layered things that are all getting in the way of ourselves. So it's not the fault of any one individual, nor should we think about doing it. We need to rethink about the structure and how we work together to be able to let people do the research, bring it to our attention, provide that feedback, and make for a better proposal. And that's the reason I want to make sure we're all focused on it's a system thing, not necessarily an individual thing. That's my perspective.
Councilmember Baldwin.
So I hope this comes through. I'm in a campground that my internet keeps going in and out. We'll see how this works. You've gone out a few times. So my concern is, has always been, and I don't remember the reason why we limited ourselves to being on one TAC, areas of emissions, let's say. But what I don't understand is why it's not possible for a council member to participate on more than one TAC, so long as any TAC has no more than 4 individuals on it. So I guess maybe that's a county council question. But it seems like you could work in more areas than one, so long as the TAC doesn't get too big, let's say.
So I know it's, thank you for the question. I know it's kind of part and parcel of the Brown Act. Jeff, do you want to weigh in here?
Maybe just taking a step back, really good discussion. I can tell there's you're all very knowledgeable about the Brown Act, and so in terms of advisory committees, or they're also known as ad hoc committees, they're basically an exception to the open meeting requirement that generally applies to legislative bodies. And so the rules, and it sounds like this, are that the advisory body has to be consist of less than a quorum of the actual legislative body, and it's supposed to be either single subject or very limited scope, and have a finite time for doing its work. And so the idea is that the ad hoc or advisory committees are supposed to look at discrete issues that ideally, best practice, the actual legislative body signs off or gives them their charge, and that's on the record. They do their work and they bring back the results of their work for consideration and further deliberation of the actual legislative body. And then once they're done, they're dissolved. And so, yeah, it's important to keep that in mind, because you don't want an ad hoc or advisory committee to kind of morph into a standing committee where they start taking on more matters that aren't given to them by the actual legislative body, and they're kind of acting in parallel to the actual legislative body. And so it sounds like that, from what I'm hearing, that is a concern. It's a valid concern under the Brown Act. And so it's something to keep in mind. In terms of Mr. Baldwin's question about whether the advisory committees, your council members can be a part of more than one advisory committee, the answer is yes. There's no prohibition on that under the Brown Act. It just, you'd need to be very careful, and the bylaws could be amended to state as Mr. Baldwin suggested, that there just cannot be a discussion about another advisory committee's work with, basically cross-pollination, because once you get to a quorum of the actual legislative body, by members of the advisory committees talking amongst themselves, and that's when you have a serial meeting under the Brown Act. And so so I'm the one that worked on the bylaws. I came up with the language about the temporary advisory committee. It was admittedly conservative in terms of ensuring that there's or decreasing the probability of an unintentional Brown Act violation, but that that could be modified. But I would just kind of go back to my larger point. The point of an advisory committee is it's supposed to be operating for a finite period of time, and so I think there would, if there's a lot of advisory committees that never finish their work, and so that's why you're having to run them in parallel, then I think you need to consider whether that's the best practice to begin with, or what if there's an issue there that could be resolved. All that being said, these issues, and I don't have to tell you, they're all extremely complicated, and so I'm not going to pretend that it doesn't take a lot of work, and it's hard. They're really hard issues, and like I said, really complicated. So they're difficult issues. So I'm just trying to, and it sounds like you already know a lot of the legal framework here with the Brown Act, and I'd be happy to answer any other questions. I hope you found my advice helpful.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Yes, Vice Chair Chavez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mick, for your statement. And there was a couple of points that you made that I completely agree with. The first one in regards to how the image of the tax and how they were going to be created. I thought they were going to be giving reports back, that we were going to be able to work together, but have smaller working groups within themselves in order to keep everyone in the loop so that we were aware of what was occurring. Yes, the transportation tax, we have not met in a while. We and Clay and Dick both can agree that we were pretty aggressive when we started our TAC. We were having at least 2 meetings a month in the beginning, speaking with different groups. So the transportation, we kind of stalled out. Dick went off and started doing his own project, which I appreciate him doing. So I guess the larger question, and this goes to our county council, is how long is a temporary TAC allowed to operate before it's considered to be a standing committee, and when it becomes subject to the Brown Act?
Yeah, that's a good question, and there's no bright line answer to that. It's kind of the rule of reason, and so if it just depends. And I mean, transportation itself is a very big overarching issue, and so I guess even calling a temporary advisory committee transportation based is potentially problematic, because it's like, okay, well, that's a huge chunk of our economy, and emissions are from that. So honestly, that causes me a little bit of concern, just the potential scope of that. And so I guess that's another option. If everything's on the table, then in terms of if you are considering reconfiguring or drilling the committees down, then maybe you want to take a more bite-sized chunk of transportation off and give that jurisdiction to that committee. That would be that might be a better option, or better practice, I should say. But yeah, though, there's no published case law on specific time limits. It just depends on a lot of factors.
So then I understand in regards to the Brown Act, and in the beginning, I did not agree with the formations of our tax. Essentially, because if a tax is working in order to accomplish something, we could have tax that operate for a year, 2 years, because there's no real hard line of when to stop. Yes, transportation is a very large one. Agriculture could be said the same thing, that it's a very large one. And then we have the others issues tax that we limited down to 3 different areas, but one of those areas technically can go either way. So they still have a full range of different issues that they can have. So none of our tax are really, I don't believe that they were designed in a way that focus on specific areas. And I believe we're not really speaking to the heart of what a temporary advisory committee is. So I think in the future, maybe we should reconsider, like, are our tax really speaking to what tax should be, and be more specific of what they're supposed to be working on. I know for transportation, we were talking about electrical vehicles and charging stations. To me, that's pretty specific. So I would say that our tax should focus only on those issues. Of course, there's a number of issues, but those, I believe, is what we need to focus on. Agriculture has their specific things that they can focus on, but I believe we still have too much full range, and I feel like it's competing with the whole council as a whole. So I guess, ultimately I wanted to know how long can a tax operate? And because there's nothing that says that it ends and by a specific date, I would say that when we're discussing the tax and how we move forward with our tax, that we as a council say, you know what, tax should operate from 6 months, 8 months. Put a time limit on ourselves so that the TAC members are aware. We need to start our work. We need to do our research. We need to be able to present, but also put in there that tax must report out at least monthly or every other month without a full on discussion, more as a receive and file type of matter, so that there's not that whole quorum thing. But those are just my comments. I appreciate you bringing this up, Mick. Definitely some concerns with the tax and how they've been operating, but hopefully we can drill down and get a little bit better handle on these tax. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. And I see Clay, you have your hand up.
I wanted to mention that we've been shorthanding the titles of these various tax, but they have defined them more than kind of how we typically talk about them. So the agriculture tax had initially indicated they would be talking about soil productivity and agricultural waste reuse, so more specified. The transportation tax indicated they would be talking about electric vehicle infrastructure and deployment. Evaluation criteria tax, obviously they went forward and then were dissolved. And the other issues tax was asked to select 3 different topics and bring those into those 3 topics of interest. And so there has been some of that conversation at this group, but obviously it's been a few months. If it's desired, I can send those around. We didn't agendize time to necessarily have a full vetting or to take action on this month. If this group would like to, staff can set time for that discussion and any changes to happen. We'd be happy to do that. But what I don't want to do is mismanage time, because you do have a couple of informational presentations that are also on the agenda. We have speakers queued up, and there's also a couple of draft proposals that were just brought forward for discussion. I wanted to give that fair airtime as well. So I wanted to bring that up and make that comment, but how you decide to proceed is up to you.
Yes, Councilmember White.
Thank you, Sylvia. Well, I know that I'm one of the people on the council who's interested in bringing forward specific recommendations to the board, just as I've worked with the committee in Ojai to recommend to the Ojai City Council. And I know Dick Baldwin has also, the two of us are the only ones so far who have brought something specific forward, either as an individual in the case of Dick's educational program, or me through the other issues TAC with the proposals that have come forward and are coming forward today. I would have to say that the TAC arrangement is cumbersome. And I know that in January, because Dick did have a really good idea on the educational program that wasn't related to anybody's TAC. And I think our council voted that it's perfectly acceptable for an individual to come forward with a proposed policy or program. And maybe that's a better way to go. I know that that I have some other things that I think are important to bring forward to the Board of Supervisors ultimately. Whether if it has to be done through a TAC, which was what we were told in the beginning, okay, that's the process we're required to comply with. But if in fact it's not required and an individual can come forward with a proposal, I'm comfortable with that as well. I would hope that every single one of us on this council is thinking to come forward with some specific proposal to advise the Board of Supervisors on climate action. How we get there, I guess I'm open, but I do intend to keep moving forward with things that aren't in the existing climate action plan, like the two proposals that are in today's agenda and others in the future. Maybe the best way is to get rid of the complication and cumbersomeness of the tax.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from other council members? Yes, Councilmember Kessler.
I have had concerns about the tax from day one. And obviously at the last meeting, there was a very specific reason to have some concerns with it going forward. I would be very much open to having this issue agendized so we can have a formal discussion about it and look at the different options and ways that we might be able to reconstruct the way we are structured so that we can all have a part and maybe even move things much more efficiently through to the Board of Supervisors, because we have a collaborative effort in getting things done. And I just feel that our process is cumbersome, and I do believe it's actually preventing us from making progress.
Anyone else?
I do want to point out that I don't think it's necessarily only the tact that's causing kind of the separate feeling maybe some people are feeling about it, because our TAC has gotten together. And but what I would say, just as an idea, as a thought in the future of what I feel will change, is when we actually can be together. Because I'm looking at my screen right now and I feel like I'm in the Brady Bunch, and so that's separate, like we're each put in boxes. I think energetically does shift the way that we respond to each other. So I do really look forward to the time that we can all be together in a room, in a space, so that there's that shared synergy. So we're really working together and building a beautiful future together, because that's what we're here to do. And so whatever the structure is, I know that the tax maybe are the ones that we're looking at, but I think also part of this discussion really is the fact that we're in these boxes, and Zoom does has its limitations of us really gathering and building a relationship. If I were to see most of you on the street, I wouldn't even recognize you unless I've known you from before. I mean, that's just, you know, so I really, really am hopeful that sometime in 2022, we can be together and really start to have those relationships, build those relationships. So whatever we all decide in terms of a tact or a non-tact, I know I was excited to hear you, Jeff, talk about that we could be on different ones, you know, because the other tact, our tact, we have a spot open. You know, if anybody wants to jump in, I really loved the way that Mick Ferris and Phil worked together, you know, for bringing that synergy together. But again, it's like we're not doing it together, right? In terms of, it's all like in a virtual environment. But I'm really wanting to help with the agriculture tact as well. If I can do both, I would love to do that. I mean, that is my expertise. I wrote a book about it. So I do presentations on it all the time. So I would really love to be involved in that one too. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And I can't wait to be in the same room with all of you.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? Councilmember Baldwin, did you have something?
I was just going to follow up with the idea that we ought to talk about this in more depth, maybe next month. I think there's a place for an individual to move forward. And I've found over my years of experience that collaborative work on some issues is also really good. I also think that there ought to be room for us to be able to work on more than one tack. It drives me nuts to not to be able to work on another issue because it's interesting to work on. You know, it's something of interest to me. So it's kind of frustrating to be stuck in a pigeonhole, if you will. That's it.
Okay, thank you. All right, so there any further comments for this item? If not, then thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Ferris, for bringing this up. Good discussion. Let's go ahead and move on to, let's see, where are we now on the agenda? Item 17, updates from temporary advisory committee. So we've reserved about 5 minutes here, and I know we still have a couple of presentations, and we are at the 12:45 mark or so. So updates from any of the committees at this point. Yes, Councilmember White.
Well, we do have a proposal, or actually two proposals on this agenda, and have talked about additional things there that we could bring forward. Again, I think it's so important that we figure out how we work. I agree with Dick's statement on the frustration of wanting to work on other things.
Thank you. Any other committee wants to report?
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Just real quick, again, I mentioned that our transportation TAC has not met for a few months. The last discussion that we had was with county's office in regards to transportation and trying to find ways on placing charging stations throughout our county and unincorporated areas, and working with different agencies in order to accomplish this. It's still a work in progress. Hopefully, Dick and I will be able to get together again, and we technically do have a free space if anyone's interested in that. But that would be all from transportation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And the Ag Tech, well, we're going to be looking at meeting here really soon. There was a meeting that took place, I think in February it was. And so we do have some things that we're going to be undertaking for that. Any other comments there for item number 17? All right, any public comments for this item on the agenda? So you could take yourself off of mute or raise your hand. Okay, seeing none, then let's go ahead if there's no other further discussions on this matter. Yes, go ahead, Councilmember Kessler.
I apologize. I tried to get your attention, Madam Chair, before we moved on to item 17. I just wanted to make sure we gave staff clear direction in item 16 that we do want to bring this back as an agenda item to discuss.
We can do that at item number 21, council
Okay.
members' comments on future agendas. Yeah, that's kind of where I thought it couldn't get far.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I do see a hand up from the public, Roseanne Witt.
Hi, I just wanted to express my support for Councilmember Chavez's suggestion that TAC should report out regularly what they're doing to advise the entire committee. I think not only will that help keep other committee members of the status and progress of the other TACs, but it will also, I know as a person who's really busy and trying to juggle multiple things, that it's easy to put things off when you have other priorities and other things that need to be taken care of immediately. So deadlines help us stay on task and make sure we're actually moving forward and making progress. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so thanks everyone. Let's go ahead and go to item number 18, presentation from County of Ventura, Public Works Agency regarding anticipated sea level rise. We had originally identified about 30 minutes for this presentation. And so, Clay, do you want to present our guest today?
Sure. Well, you have the Public Works Agency here. Thank you so much, Public Works Agency, for coming with us. And I think the lead person on their presentation is Glenn Shepard, who is our director of our watershed division of Public Works Agency, which is leading a lot of this effort. So Glenn, go ahead and take it away.
Hey, thanks, Chair Schnapp and members of the council. Thanks for the invitation today to bring climate change impacts as it relates to Public Works Agency and the facilities that we have and operate, maintain, and then plan in our capital improvement project program. We've been I'm joined today by Jeff Pratt, who's our agency director, just slipped in here, and Assistant Public Works Agency Director, Dave Fleisch. So over the last several months, we've been on a journey to look at climate change, both from a rainfall perspective and a coastal impact perspective as it relates to our capital infrastructure. And I'm going to go through about 15 slides here and then discuss how that impacts and gets us ready for planning for the future. We'll start off with the first half of the first couple of slides here. We'll talk about precipitation, and then we'll get into the coastal impacts. Here, just orientation wise to show you the watersheds within the county. The map on the left-hand side highlights the main watershed components. The upper left is the Ventura River and North Coast watershed. This big watershed you see here in the middle highlights two important components. The Sespe Creek watershed, which really begins up in San Bernardino County and then flows behind the Ojai Mountains, dumps into the Santa Clara River here in the heart of the county spatially, and then heads out to the ocean. And then the Cayugas watershed is in the middle south of the county, picks up East County, and drains out through the Pleasant Valley Oxnard Plain and exits at the naval base. And then in the south is the Malibu Creek watershed and South Coast. This picture on the right just depicts the complex nature of the various drainages as it flows through the heart of the primarily inhabited area of the county, and also depicts the cities that are involved. Most of the drainages obviously go through the cities. The County Watershed Protection District has jurisdiction throughout that countywide. The cities often have their local drainages and plan accordingly for any activities within the city limits. Highlighting a couple slides here in precipitation. So what's on the screen here is our longest running rain gauge, and we're looking here at long-term annual precipitation average over time. And this location is the Ventura City rain gauge at City Hall, and it began in 1873. And this chart shows it going through last year's rain year. And if you look to the far right, the little bar, it was the driest year on record last year. And the highlight here is just to show general trends that from an annual rainfall perspective throughout the county. And this is occurring at other rainfall gauges that we've been monitoring, but I wanted to highlight this one because it's our longest running rain gauge in time. Is that the average over time is decreasing ever slightly. And highlighting just as we looked at annual rainfall, back in the early days, average on the coast there, Ventura City, was about 16 inches. And now it's the average is declining to 14 inches on an annual basis. So, you know, when watching the weather on TV, they'll say, oh, the annual average is, and they'll pick a number. But we're showing that the average does change over time, and it has a declining nature throughout the county of Ventura. The other aspect that we've been searching on with our local in-house experts is the precipitation intensity. And they've been looking at studies throughout Southern California, and the predictions are that the design rainfall intensity could be increased by 5 or 10%. And I wanted just to show an example here from Watershed Protection's hydrology team and the models that they operate and maintain, that with a 5 or 10% expected increase in intensity of the storm, and so that's generally measured in inches per hour. I have an example up here at the Sexton Canyon rain gauge, which is in Ventura. So the 100-year or 1% chance storm event with a 1 hour intensity is expected at 1.81 inches per hour. And within our own modeling, the confidence interval range of that particular rain gauge is 1.66 to 2.01 inches per hour. So if we took a 10% increase in that intensity expectation, it would be close to the upper limits of our confidence interval. So we are expecting in Southern California, with that design storm, that the hydrology and hydraulics of our capital facilities within Watershed will be able to accommodate that at least in the next 50 to 100 years. So that's all on rainfall at this point. I'm going to change gears and head to the coast. And this is just a general map from Noaa describing the physical factors as it relates to the coast. And you probably have seen and heard most of these terms. And in other briefs, we've talked about this. The term swash is the run-up of water after the wave crashes. So that may be a new term for you all as it relates to wave setup, and another term called wave run-up. They're combined to some extent. Swash tends to be more of a horizontal running run-up, as perhaps different than you understood in the past with wave run-up, which is a vertical measurement. And within the coastal threats that Public Works is looking at, we're looking and studying sea level rise, what's occurring, what's planned, what the experts are telling us, high tide flooding, and any shoreline retreat. The graph here in the middle is showing expectations from various models of expected sea level rise. It's not based on any particular location. This is general trends, and the range there is based on different types of modeling with expectations with greenhouse gases and snow melt at the polar ice caps. This chart over here on the right is really, and this has been a recent discovery, at least in the last couple of months. We've been looking at high tide flooding and an increase in magnitude and frequency of that as it relates to time going forward. And shoreline retreat, just an example of an outfall we have for one of our pumps in the Silver Strand area, west of Oxnard. This is an outfall we have from one of those pump systems in the surf zone. Last several years, there's been a number of studies and utilizing models that were created around the turn of the century. And there's been a varied level of risk and probability of what that expectation is over the previous decade. And many of you probably have seen some of these. I just put this on here as extreme levels in the past decade have been in this area, 10 feet expectation, and the low is between 1/2 foot and 2.3 feet. The modeling associated with activity in the last decade is shown here on this screen, and it models out the expectation, the exponential rise or inflection that's expected by those models as they were created back in 2000. So the modeling activity back then was not very refined, and that's why we're seeing a lot of variation in the expectation, as the models have not been very stable as they were built on Fortran platforms back in the day. The probability of sea level rise is on this slide, hard to read, but the key point here is on the fluvial side, or when we're looking at hydrology and rainfall as it flows down through the drainages. We often, the term of art looking at probability is 1%, and that probability in the old vernacular was a 100-year storm. And the probabilities here, from a median perspective of looking at the uncertainties, this box here is a 50, a middle range of sea level rise at a 50% probability, and then it jumps to 6.6 feet at a 0.5 probability, and that's equal to a 1 in 200 chance. So that would be like a 200-year storm. So the probability is fairly varied as it relates to sea level rise and predictions up to this point. Getting a little closer to home, we've been looking at historic sea level rise in Southern California, and the pictures on the screen highlight one of our longest running tide gauges is at Santa Monica, and it shows sea level rise over about almost 100 years now. And you see the variations in blue that have been normalized, and it's been gaining at the top. You can see this little number up here, 1.54 plus or minus 0.31 millimeters per year. So it's been steadily rising, but it's not very much in the long run. And so we also looked at, from the early models from 2000, we said, okay, well, let's just plot where actual sea level rise is occurring in Santa Monica. And so this red line you see down in the superimposed on the modeling that I've shown you before is running fairly linear, almost exactly linear if I were to show you a data chart for the first 20 years of those models out through 2021. And if that were to stay linear all the way through, it would equate to about 1/2 foot out of 2021. So not, we haven't seen an inflection point as the the other models are predicting, and that's what is occurring currently at Santa Monica. And there are other gauges on the coast. There's one in Santa Barbara, and there used to be one in Ventura. One in Santa Barbara is only has about 35 years of runtime, and so statistically, it's not in the scientific world as being meaningful at this moment. And most recently, we became aware of a Noaa report that came out the last month or so. And this is getting a lot of federal agencies together and looking at conditions that have occurred since 2020 and all the detailed studies that were done last decade. And their key takeaways is the narrowing the projected sea level rise with respect to taking out the high extreme non-probabilistic model event and introducing more rigor into high tide flood events, which I'll show you here in a minute. And the last bullet there is just talking to the narrowing of sea level rise band at year 2021, as I described earlier. But focus on the high tide flooding events. We coming out of that report in this area, a minor flood event, 1.9 feet plus mean higher high water at the coast, and a moderate flood event would be 2.8 feet as described. And the key component there is in the report is it looks for kind of near term. This report goes out through the 50, really only 30 years out, but to year 2050. A little different than other literature and discussions that was focusing on moving or predicting the sea level rise state at year 2100. This is looking at more near-term events through 2050. And what they are predicting, at least here in Southern California, is that right now we have a minor flood event. So it equates to the definition here every year, and a moderate flood event once every 25 years. The prediction is that the minor event would occur in year 2050 to 10 times a year, and you would get the moderate flood elevation event once a year. And our discussion with respect to that is, minor floods tend to be considered a nuisance type event, as it's combined, an event is combined with maybe a high tide, a king tide, and locally that might be at San Juan in Ventura, the San Juan area where the State Beach is located, the drainage under 101, and watershed protection has a break that runs out there as well. But it floods, it does flood there, and so the nuisance event every year would be nuisance, and at some point the public is not going to consider that a nuisance, which may consider some adaptive management or other activities in planning for any infrastructure that we have there. And stay focused on where, with respect to watershed planning, this map is just highlighting watershed jurisdiction in yellow nodes, and the red nodes on this chart highlight where watershed protection has jurisdiction and a facility. And I'll also mention that here on the north coast, Public Works, water and sanitation has a wastewater conveyance system here along the north coast as it comes down to Ventura. And of course, the county road network, roads of transportation within Public Works also has county road assets along this coastal area. But from a watershed protection perspective, the highlight here is we are going to be planning and looking at adaptive management component for the facilities that we have in red, and then in yellow, we'll have to monitor both climate and sea level rise activities in the future for the yellow locations where we don't have facilities today, but could lead to facility development here in the future. And the last slide, as we get ready to move forward within climate impacts to public works, this just highlights the planning kind of continuum that we'll be tracking through in the near term, certainly the future as it relates to what we have and the capital improvement program for facilities that need to be developed and or modified. And with that, that was my short brief on climate and sea level rise. Subject to any of your all's questions, we are here.
Thank you. So are there any, let's go to public comments. Are there any questions from the public with regards to this presentation?
Chair, if I could, just to add a little data point on Glenn's presentation. What we're doing now is doing the analysis to be able to come to the Board of Supervisors and have a discussion with them about what planning criteria we should use for our facilities. Obviously, for every foot more of sea level rise we have to plan for, the cost goes up exponentially. So our analysis in this is really dealing with our planning for our infrastructure. And that's the purpose for the studies we're doing and looking at. We're not trying to make a comment about whether we agree or disagree with somebody else's analysis for another purpose. But for the watershed facilities and our road network that is within that area, we have to make an assessment of how far we think is realistic for planning for the near term and the longer term. So for 20 to 30 years out and for 70 to 80 years out.
I appreciate that additional information. Thank you, Dave. Thank you for providing that. All right, so any comments from the public? I think I'll just go with that 18B, public comments. So if anybody wants to raise their hand or take themselves off of mute. I don't see anyone on the public. So let's go ahead and have council member discussion. So I see your hand, Council Member White.
Okay, thank you very much, Public Works Agency. A most interesting presentation. And it's sobering to see what climate change is doing to the sea level rise along our coast. Our Climate Emergency Council was created to advise the Board of Supervisors on actions that they can take within their power to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to mitigate climate change in the first place, along with sea level rise. And I guess my question is, does the Public Works Agency have in place programs and policies that mitigate, reduce greenhouse gas emissions from their own operations?
Oh, so good afternoon, Chair Snott, council members. My name is Jeff Pratt. I'm the Public Works Director for Ventura County. The answer to your question is yes. They're listed in the Climate Action Plan. We follow the fleet's guidance. You know, we've reduced, we've bought as many hybrids as we can. We've got lots of plans on energy plans. We put in solar plants. I mean, there are any number of things. We didn't come prepared to talk about that, but if you want a long list of that, I can get it for you. But we came to show you what our planning is doing for climate change. And why do we do that? Because it may seem at odds with other plans you're going to see. So we need your input on anything you think we might have gotten wrong or you'd like to see us do differently. As Dave said, When we go to the board, we plan for 5 years out on capital plans. Those 5 years are going to happen no matter what, and they're expensive. $750 million for the next 5 years on the county capital. Then we also have a 30-year plan that looks out, and that's the one where we need the board's input, because we're going to start seeing, we haven't seen the inflection point that you see on those models. I worked at Noaa for several years, by the way, in the early 80s on climate change and the aerosol particles group. And that's 2 million lines of Fortran code that put together that's very unstable. So we have to be very careful that we don't overdo this with any sort of model that isn't accurate yet. And so what we're going to do is probably an adaptive management plan. In other words, we're going to have to construct infrastructure that can be easily modified when the inflection point starts. That inflection point, as I understand it, is supposed to start when the ice caps start melting. That's the real unknown in this for the moment. So that's what we're here to talk about. I'll get you the information on what Public Works is doing for climate change. It's in the Climate Action Plan, and we're part of the Climate Action Council here, staff members that work as well.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from the council or Public Works? Yes, go ahead, Councilmember Ramirez, go ahead.
So that was really interesting for me to just see it, the numbers for where we live. I know that it, climate change boils down to water, too much or too little of it. I would, if you're here also to get input on the presentation itself, I did find that even myself, who's done a lot of research in water and have looked at a lot of different graphs and stuff, I felt like it could use another layer of distillation. So like here are the graphs. What is that? Now can you bring it down a little bit to another level where I can understand it as a narrative, would be helpful and useful, I think, when you do present this to the county. And also just kind of thinking about it, because I'm always thinking about it in terms of how do you communicate these really big and difficult. I mean, you guys are coming at this from a mindset of a researcher that is looking at these numbers all the time. So how can we look at this in a way that we could tell the story to somebody who doesn't look at those numbers or those charts ever, so like in a brochure form, and kind of going back to what Councilman Baldwin has brought to this committee in terms of the education piece. And so how can we create some kind of brochure, even presentation that doesn't even have very many of those graphs, but how can you tell the story in a different way that doesn't rely so heavily on the graphs, I guess is what I'm saying, would be a challenge. And maybe that's something that we could help with as well.
Thank you. That's good. That's good input. And yes, it was. We prepared this to talk with other climate change folks around here, and it does need to be simplified. Basically, what you saw were 3 different models: Ocean Protection Council, Noaa, and the Army Corps of Engineers. I don't know if it was on the graphs. I don't know if you could read it, but those are 3 experts we look to and who we hide behind a lot of times when we don't have the resources to do all the research that they do. We could certainly simplify it. I think that's very good advice. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions for the Public Works Agency? Councilmember Baldwin, did you have a question?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you. With that, thank you so much from this team to yours. Great presentation, good information. I didn't realize we had collected data points at those places and one of them for a long time. So really appreciate then this look into your view, your world, and thank you so much for making the time joining us today.
Thank you for the time.
Thank you. All right, so with that, then let's go ahead and go to item number 19. This is a presentation from the Tri-County Regional Energy Network, also known as 3C-REN. And we've allocated some time here for the team to present. Looks like we have Erica Helson from the 3C-REN staff.
So let me go ahead and just welcome Erica here. So Erica is on my team in the county sustainability division. So she works in 3C REN. 3C REN is one of the major initiatives that is under the sustainability division for its component of work that's done out of here in Ventura County. And so it is a regional collaboration that Erica is going to be sharing with you what they do specifically. She's got some great information to share about some of the programs and approaches. So Erica, go ahead and take it away.
All right, thank you all. And then Clay, will you remind me how much time? And I know that we're a little behind schedule.
We are
plan
behind. If it's we have 25 minutes allocated as total time on the agenda, but that's going to make us late for other things. If we can make total time closer to about 15 minutes, I don't know if it's possible to squeeze everything in your presentation in 10-ish.
Yeah,
would be excellent.
Yes, no problem. Okay, nice to meet you all. Thank you for inviting me here. As Clay mentioned, I am his colleague with the County of Ventura Sustainability Division. And let me share my screen. You can all hear me okay in the meantime? Yeah, okay. Alrighty. So I know some of you are probably already familiar with 3C REN, but I'm gonna just assume some people know nothing. So I'll start from scratch, and I'm excited to share what we've been up to. So let me just kick it off. 3C REN stands for the Tri-County Regional Energy Network. Our vision is to create a sustainable, equitable, and economically vibrant Central Coast for all. So when we say 3C or Tri-County, we're referring to the counties of San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara, and Ventura counties. Our mission is to support local climate goals through the delivery of energy saving programs that empower a sustainable local economy and reduce social disparities on the Central Coast. So in case that sounds a little jargony, we're very focused on addressing climate change through the reduction of energy use and therefore emissions. And we're also focused on equity and making sure that these programs reach the hard to reach communities, people who often don't have access to these types of services. So that's a little bit about what we're trying to do. So again, we're 3 counties working together to improve energy efficiency in the region. Our initial 8-year portfolio was approved by the California Public Utilities Commission. I don't remember the exact year because this is before my time, and I have to credit Alejandra for all the work that she did on making the REN possible for our region. But that initial 8-year portfolio was approved for, right here, 2018 for $50 million. And we primarily, with that portfolio, serve 2 audiences, households and workforce, meaning all the industry professionals who work on buildings and the energy efficiency of buildings. We did recently, in March, submit a new business plan for $155 million. So this is a big expansion on the current plan, and that would cover the years 2024 to 2031. And it would expand our services to also include the agricultural sectors, the commercial sector, and the public sector. So we probably won't know for about, it could be a year, could be less, if and when that new portfolio is approved. But the goal is to continue growing our regional energy network. So a little bit of background on regional energy networks. Historically, this funding that we have access to, it's utility ratepayer funding. So in this diagram, you can see that the money flows from all of us who pay energy bills up to the utilities. That money goes to the CPUC, who then redistributes it to program administrators. So in the past, it was only the utilities that operated these types of energy efficiency programs. But there were some regulatory changes that allowed local government to have access to these funds. And so our county, along with Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo, took advantage of this opportunity and said, hey, we feel like oftentimes the funding that goes to the utilities, because they're based in the urban areas, it's not really reaching us in our more geographically remote territory. So we would love to operate our own programs. And so that's what we're doing. So there are lots of benefits to bringing those ratepayer dollars back to our region. So we're investing in our local community. We're creating a market for energy efficiency. We're building a really robust workforce that understands where the energy industry is headed. And we're also strengthening our local economy in the process and supporting resiliency to climate change. All right, this is the 3C REN team. So from Ventura County, this is the staff. So Alejandra, who I know you're all familiar with, myself here on the bottom, my colleague Ian Logan, and then my other colleague Itzel Torres. In Santa Barbara, we also have several staff members and one Civic Spark fellow. And then in San Luis Obispo, we have a couple additional staff members and one Civic Spark fellow. Itzel was one of our former Civic Spark fellows, and then she came on board as full-time staff. So there are several people across the 3 counties supporting 3C REN. And then in addition, we have a whole bunch of contracted partners because they're, and I'll get into this when I explain our programs. There are a lot of programs that we're operating. It takes a lot of effort. So we have all of these different, these are actually just a few of our contracted partners. So that's just to give you a flavor of who's behind 3C REN. So in our current portfolio, as I mentioned, the $50 million 8-year portfolio that was approved in 2018, that included 3 programs that we were approved for. Building performance training, which is essentially a workforce development program, Energy Code Connect, and that's it's like a technical code support Title 24 program. And then the last is home energy savings, and that's more like a traditional rebate program. So I'll get into each of these in more detail. And in the interest of time, I'm just going to give an overview of the program, and then I have some slides on what we've achieved to date, but I don't think we have time to get into that. So you will have these slides and you can look over those in more detail. Okay, so where we've started and where we've gone in the past approximately, we started operating programs mid-2019, so about the past 2.5 years. So we launched this program, Building Performance Training. County of Ventura is the lead on this program, and it's supported by the other counties as well. So this program helps workers thrive as the industry evolves. So we know that the way buildings operate is changing for health and safety reasons because we need to address climate change and the emissions that come from buildings. So the role of this program is to help the professionals who work in buildings understand what are the trends in the industry, how do buildings work as systems, and what do I need to know to create really high performing buildings. So the audience is current and prospective building professionals. This is anyone from an architect, a plumber, an electrician, real estate professionals. We're even now working with the people who operate cannabis cultivation facilities because those are very energy intensive. So it's anyone who already works in the industry, but we're also targeting for this program younger people or career transitioners, people who are interested in joining the industry. The services we offer, it's an educational program. So what this means in practice is that we offer a whole bunch of webinars. We used to offer in person, and we'll return to that in due time, but it's training to help people understand the topics that are relevant to this industry. So we talk about things like the building envelope, air sealing, heat pump technology, and then we also focus on soft skills. How do you market and sell these things, especially with the changes that buildings will need to go through to lower their emissions? Sometimes this means new technology and changing systems, and how you sell that to a customer might be really different from how you sold systems of the past. Whoops. So I'm going to skip through this. This just gives an overview of how many events we've held, attendees and collaborations, some of the topics we've gone over. And keep in mind, this data is for the Tri-County region. We're now collecting more and more details so that we'll be able to break this out by county, but this is just as a newer organization, something that we didn't have the foresight in the initial years. I'll also skim past this. This is about a case study that we did with SBCC. It would be great to do similar collaborations with the Ventura College system, and that's something that we're working on. Okay, so that was our building performance training program. So now we'll talk about Energy Code Connect. So this program makes the energy code easy to follow. So we know that Title 24 and the Energy Code, if you've ever dealt with a contractor, is a point of frustration. The code is really complicated. It changes every 3 years. So this program is meant to demystify the code, make it easier to follow. So the audience for this is all building professionals. So whether you work in the public sector or the private sector, if you deal with the energy code, this program's for you. And there are several sub-services. So the energy code coach, this is like, it's like a help hotline. You can call the code coach if you want to know, like, what are the energy code requirements for a heat pump water heater? The energy code coach could help you answer that. There's also an online web form. So this is something that homeowners can use as well if you're doing a project. Okay, so that's energy code coach training. Just like the building performance training program, we do webinars. We'll do in-person training as well. And this is especially important when we have the code cycle updates. So every 3 years we get our new code. And then the architects and the contractors, they may not know what the new code requires. So this is sort of like a boot camp for them. They can attend our training and learn what the changes are. Regional forums, these are more like networking type of events. When we held our first forum, it was in person in Santa Barbara. We had about 100 people from across the 3 counties coming together to talk about the new code cycle change. Our most recent forum was directed towards households to understand what electrification is and what it means for all of us here on the Central Coast. So those events happen about 3 times a year. And then lastly, we have a new service, which is reach code support. So different jurisdictions that are interested in passing a reach code, let's say an all electric reach code, we have technical support that can help city staff pass that reach code. So in our territory, Southern California Edison administers the support, and the northern counties, 3C Ren, implements that support through our partners. Okay, again, this is just, I'm gonna skip past this, but there's some data on the code coach, what types of topics come in, when the program was launched. Same for the trainings, how many events we've held to date, how many people have attended, what types of topics we cover. Forums, same thing. And then this case study, I will just touch on this briefly because this was a great project that's more relevant to our county. So the code coach met with the chief building official at the Ventura County building department and said, this is what the code coach service is. We want to better understand what are your challenges when it comes to enforcing the building code. And they said, we have this project that would be great to get your help on. We are looking for county approved Title 24 compliant construction documents for farm worker housing units that can also be used as ADU documents. So the idea was, let's increase energy code compliance and then reduce design and construction costs by creating these templated construction documents that are compliant with the energy code. So our code coach worked with the building staff and put together these 9 different design packages. And that shows you how you can build an ADU that is compliant with the energy code if you follow these plans. So I put a link down here, 3cren.org/resource-library. You can find the case study there, and I can also send it around. Our workforce programs, all these trainings have been really well attended. And part of the reason why is that we offer learning units and we also offer certifications, and all of our events are totally free because we have our ratepayer funding. So we offer AIA units for architects, ICC units for code professionals. We have learning units for real estate professionals. And then we're also doing certification courses. So we've done passive house design certification, green designation for realtors, and then Building Performance Institute certification. All right, moving into our last program, home energy savings. So again, this is more like a conventional rebate program that you all might be more familiar with, where you get sort of like a $1 per unit type of rebate. So the purpose of this program, we lower energy bills and improve homes while reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Our target audience is households, especially those that are underserved. So anyone in our region is eligible for our programs, but in terms of marketing, we really try and reach historically underserved households. The services we provide for multifamily, we do audits and incentives. That's where we work with property developers and managers, housing authorities. So if you have any relationships to those sorts of organizations, please make sure they know about home energy savings. there's big rebates available. I think it's $750 per apartment unit is the base incentive. And then there are bonus incentives for electrification measures like heat pump hot water heaters. So it's an additional $1,000 per heat pump water heater, for example. So there's a lot of funding on the table, especially for affordable housing. And then we also just recently relaunched our new single family program. So this is a single family home or units with 1 to 4 apartments. And you need to work with a contractor who's enrolled in our program. So we're doing outreach to get more contractors enrolled, but we'll be sharing more information about that program. It just launched this month. Okay, so again, I'll skip past this was for the original program that we launched, and then we sunsetted the program because we were having some challenges with adoption, especially in our county. So we relaunched a new program that has a much more innovative program model. So again, more to come on that program. It's brand new. And then I won't get into this as well. It's a case study of a multifamily project where we, 3C Ren, installed all the different measures that are highlighted in green. So this was for like a whole building farm worker housing project in Santa Maria. Okay, so I tried to keep it quick. I'm gonna leave you with this slide where you can learn more about our events, how to reach the code coach, and how to learn more about our incentive programs. And then I'll open it up to questions.
Thank you, Erica. That was fantastic. Chair, we can hand it over to you.
All right, thank you. So thank you, Erica, for this presentation. Let's go to public comment. So is there anyone from the public who'd like to ask a question at this time or make any comments?
I see no hands raised in the gallery at the moment.
Right, I don't see any, thank you. And so let's go ahead and open it up for council member discussion and comments. So I see Vice Chair Chavez, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to thank her for the presentation. It was a great presentation, lots of great information, and yes, I was. So I do appreciate the information very much. Madam Chair, I just also wanted to mention that I have to log off. My 4-year-old has a medical appointment, so I will be logging off at this time. But I just wanted to make those comments that I do appreciate learning more about the 3C Ren and look forward to diving a little bit more into the links and information in the slides. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Yes, Councilmember Ramirez.
Hi, Erica. I was hoping that you could actually walk us through, if you could take over the screen again, and if you could take us to the website itself so we can see it. And like if I was a homeowner who wanted to find out about what incentives there are to electrify, what would I do if I was trying to navigate your system?
Oh, Erica, you're on mute.
Let me pull up the site. And there are a couple things I forgot to mention, so I can give you a preview of that too. But give me just a moment to get rid of my screen. Okay, so this is the 3C Ren site. And our home energy savings page is where you would go to if you were looking for rebates. So the multifamily program is what is most active now. As I mentioned, the other program, it's sort of informally launched. So we'll be adding more information. If I show you on the site, it'll say more coming soon. But if let's say that you were a multifamily property owner, manager, this is where you would go and you could learn more about the eligibility guidelines. We have an overview webinar of the program, some flyers, FAQs, and this is more information about the types of measures, hot water, HVAC, and what benefits each of them offers. And then there's an interest form that you would fill out and then our team would get in touch with you. I'm showing you all this not because I think you're multifamily property owners and managers, but that will be a similar process for the single family program when it launches. But right now it just says coming soon. So for that program, the way it will work is 3C Rent is currently enrolling contractors. So once the contractor is enrolled in our program, they will show up on our site. And if you're looking for example, to replace a water heater, or you're looking to replace a furnace, you can find a contractor who does that type of work. And if they're enrolled in the program, then they will do an analysis of your home, do a proposal for you, and show you the incentive levels that you are eligible for. So this program is not like your typical rebate program where we can say every hot water heater is eligible for $1,000. It's going to depend on your home and the actual energy savings that you can achieve. So rebate programs historically are based on assumed energy savings. This program, we want to see actual savings. We need to know that the energy saving measures are actually having an impact. So that's why we don't have the more straightforward model where we can say exactly the rebate level. So it'll be more customized, but the process will be to work with a contractor who's enrolled in the program. Does that make sense? I know it's a little bit of a complicated model.
Well, so it would be in the same vein where you go onto your site, you fill out the form, and then, or you find the contractor and then deal with the contractor directly, or is it the same kind of form? I like that form where you get the consultation, somebody calls you, kind of like the way that solar works right now, right? You call them up, they give you a consultation, they look at your energy usage, they do a proposal based on your specific home. So that would be, is that similar? Is that what you're talking about?
It will be similar in that you'll have the option to say, either have a contractor call me, or you can pick a contractor to contact yourself. You know, some people don't want to share their information. They'd rather go directly to the contractor that they want to work with, but you'll be given the option to say, contact me, or go ahead and reach out directly to a contractor. Another thing on the website that I wanted to share is actually, before I want to show you our on-demand page, but another resource that we'll be highlighting as part of our single family program is the Switches On. So this is a statewide initiative on electrification. So the whole purpose of this campaign is to let people know what electrification is, how it's helpful in addressing climate change. And they have, if you scroll down, a rebate finder. So you can plug in your zip code, and then it will show you the rebates that are available. And 3C RENs, our single family program, will be added here too. So this is another really good resource that we'll be promoting. 3C REN is a partner on the Switches On, and it's a good aggregator of different rebates that are available.
All right.
Okay.
Any other questions from council members? So I see your hand up. Go ahead, Councilmember White.
Yes, Erica, this is a fantastic presentation, and it's so good to see what 3C REN and the Sustainability Division is doing in county government. You know, looking at the emissions from buildings, it's a huge chunk of the pie of the greenhouse gas emissions in Ventura County. And you're certainly doing a great job of attacking those emissions and reducing them. And later on, you know, I'll be presenting a recommendation to strengthen and expand what the sustainability is doing on particularly existing buildings. More especially commercial buildings. And again, thank you very much. This is wonderful stuff you're doing.
Oh,
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from council members?
It would be really nice too, Erica, if you can let us know when that is up and running for the single family homes. So we can check it out, and also it could be mentioned here for people who do listen into this, because that's really important. And I mean, how many years has 3C Ren been active?
About 2.5.
It's pretty tremendous how much has been done in that time frame, for sure. And I also really like the vulnerability of saying we worked on this project and it wasn't working, and so now let's come through and figure out another way. So I really appreciate that too, because this is all trying to figure out what is the best way to communicate all this information to individual people, right? To help them to change behaviors, which sometimes isn't as simple as it may seem. So it's pretty tremendous what you've done, and coming at it from all the different angles of it, you know, working with designers, working with real estate agents, working with builders, and then down to the consumer.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other comments, Erica? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, per the last comment about staying up to date, I can share through Clay, sign up for a newsletter so you can stay updated on 3C Ren happenings.
Great, thank you. It's wonderful to see this really very integrated approach that seems like it would be a model for other organizations, other places along the state to implement. So appreciate your thoughtfulness in your presentation this morning. Thank you, Erica.
You know, just that really brought something else up, Erica, when you said that, because I'm in this whole world of list building and funnels and all that kind of stuff of how, so I've been working on how do you use these models in doing activism work. And what I've noticed is that some of the public agencies are beginning to use those same models as well, because they work. And I'm thinking about one of the big things they talk about is these lead magnets, right? Where we see them all the time when we're on Facebook or Instagram, where they say, you know, for more info, to get 5 ways to electrify your house, you know, give more info. And then as a result, you download and you get whatever book or template that would be useful. And then you're getting people's email so that they can be put on the newsletter. So, I mean, I don't know if you guys are already doing it, like, because it could be so micro in terms of the 3 counties of how to engage with the public in a way, in going to the place that the forum in which they already are, which is in social media, to start letting people know about these incentives so that people will start making the switch over. Because I think at this point, there's so much low hanging fruit of people who want to make that transition, but we're also time starved, that giving us ways to do it in simple, like, okay, look at this is showing up on my feed. Here in Ventura County, there's these incentives. I actually need to change my water, whatever heater. So this is perfect timing for me. So anyways, it's something to think, you know, as you're growing and expanding and getting deeper in the work that you're doing with 3Gen, I could already see that the work you're doing is very innovative. So maybe thinking about moving into that arena as well, of thinking about it in the terms of a lead magnet and building your audience and utilizing what the private sector has done so well and replicating it into the public sector.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And thanks to the 3C Ren team for this presentation. Good work. So with that, let's move on to item number 20, review and discuss draft proposals from the other issues TAC regarding emissions from existing buildings. So who would like to present this? Is it Councilmember White?
Okay, yes, thank you, Sylvia. I'll take that. You know, the other issues TAC includes looking at greenhouse gas emissions from buildings. And I know that already in the climate action plan, the Board of Supervisors made a commitment to adopt a REACH code for new construction for new buildings that we're still waiting to see from county planning. But for existing buildings, it's a significant chunk of the emissions pie. Building energy use is about 17%, most of which comes from burning natural gas in buildings, especially for space heating and water heating. And so there are two proposals that are in the packet. They're not ready for prime time, for not going to be proposed for adoption today. And they're draft. So I know there are some things that need to be worked out, and Clay has had some good comments. And would welcome comments from any of you on suggestions to make them better. The first one is a program to reduce carbon dioxide emissions from existing residential and non-residential buildings. And what Erica just presented, what 3C Ren is doing, and correct me if I'm wrong, Erica, but I think it's primarily related thus far to residential buildings. And certainly residential buildings are the most common kinds of buildings, but there are also non-residential buildings. I know in a previous meeting, Maggie mentioned the million square feet, I believe, of commercial space that her company manages. And there may well be a lot of greenhouse gas emissions associated with those buildings. So this proposal would be a program to reduce emissions from existing buildings, both residential and commercial, strengthening and expanding what the CEO's sustainability division is already doing by adding another full-time staff person and particularly focusing more on non-residential buildings. So the draft is in your packet. I hope you've had a chance to go through it. You know, it sets some goals and emission targets that are basically what's in the climate action plan in general. So that's the first one. The second one, oh, and on that one, I want to expand that 3C RIM primarily works with through the Public Utilities Commission on money that comes through the utility payments and recycled back into the community. And in the packet, I had asked Clay to send out a newspaper article announcing the Biden administration making available to the states money for, in essence, electrification efforts to address climate change. So there is money available, and there will be more money available to attack the problem of retrofitting buildings with electricity and reducing the amount of natural gas burn. Okay, so that's the first program. The second one is looking at the county's own buildings. The county occupies, I believe Clay said, 3 million or so square feet of buildings distributed throughout the county. And in those buildings as a collection, certainly there are lots of greenhouse gas emissions emitted from burning natural gas in those buildings. for heating, for water heating, and to a smaller degree for cooking. Dick Baldwin and I, before we were on this climate council, lobbied the Board of Supervisors to create a policy, a board policy to electrify the county vehicle fleet when they're replacing vehicles that are to be retired and to be replaced, to prioritize electric vehicles. So it was a policy decision the board made to reduce their climate change effects by adopting this policy. And that is now in effect, and the county does buy electric vehicles. So this proposed program that's in the packet today, please look at it, would be analogous to the policy decision made by the board on vehicles, but it would relate to electrifying county buildings and reducing natural gas consumption where it's feasible, where it makes sense, to make a policy so that when, for example, furnaces burn out, that they could be replaced with heat pumps, which is essentially the equal cost change. So that's the proposal, to make it a policy that our group, our council would recommend that the board adopt a policy to electrify their buildings to the extent they can over time. I want to go back to the retrofit program. I want to emphasize that the proposal is that it's voluntary. It's not mandatory, like the REACH code is mandatory for new construction. The retrofit program would be voluntary. So we're probably out of time. No, I guess we have a few minutes. I would be happy to answer questions about this.
Okay, so thank you, Councilmember White. Looks like two very good drafts that have come to us for consideration. I do see, let's go to public comment. So I do see Don Price, you have a hand up, go ahead.
Thank you. Councilmember White, nice proposal. One thing I'm looking for is a metric, and I'm not sure I'm seeing one. Is there anything in here that will help us determine what the degree of emission reductions are? And if we then, therefore, if we can count them towards our climate action plan?
Yes, there are, Don. Thanks for asking a question. It's a good question. There are metrics, there are goals, and you know, they're goals, and the emission reductions are based on the emission reduction goals that are in the county's climate action plan, namely 59% reduction by 2030. 41% reduction by 2030, 61% by 2040, 80% by 2050. Whether these programs and policies can achieve those goals, I'm not sure. But I think it's important to set goals. The goals are already in the climate action plan. I wish I could promise that the board approving these would achieve those goals. I can be hopeful that they're really going to try to make that happen.
With that, then, any other comments, sorry, from the public for this item? Okay, so seeing none, let's go ahead and entertain questions or comments from the council. Yes, go ahead, Councilmember Kessley, and then Councilmember Ferris.
Well, thank you very much. Phil, good, Councilmember White, good proposals. I appreciate you bringing them to us. I just, point of clarification, when I brought up about the 1 million square feet of property, it was to make another point about how the tax are functioning, so we won't go back and revisit that. And I do want to just make this statement, only very few of our buildings have any gas to them whatsoever. However, it is something that obviously I have a lot of interest in. I have some knowledge. I do a lot of reading and studying, and I'm doing a lot of research. And one of the things that always concerns me, even though I see the word voluntary, which I really appreciate, when it becomes, or if it should become mandatory, it feels that this needs to be tightened up quite a bit. And we do need to know what the impacts would be, what the costs are going to be, what the return on investment is going to be for property owners that have existing buildings, that it could be very, very costly and cumbersome for them to retrofit. So I just would like to make sure that we kind of go back and maybe tighten this up a little bit before it gets proposed to the Board of Supervisors.
Thank you for that, Maggie.
And then go ahead, Councilmember Ferris.
Yeah, thank you. I have a few questions, and again, I do like the proposals that have come forward to us too. So, so for my sense, I would like to make sure that the criteria that we have, it sort of addresses the intent of it and gets a little bit more quantified, so that we're able to back up the recommendation if the council makes it to the board. But and for that reason, I just wanted to go through a few things. Maybe we can have some notes taken and be able to go back to again, consistent with Councilmember Kessley said, sort of tighten it up a little bit in doing this. But I do have some questions that maybe Councilmember White can answer for me as we're going along. So on the first one about like the voluntary program for existing things in the county, I personally, I may quibble with whether it's a medium impact or not, and for a few, and it might be more low for a few reasons. One, it is voluntary. Two, I think if it's drafted, if I read it correctly, it only affects buildings in the unincorporated areas of the county, right? So probably we should, and that gets into another question I had, and maybe you can answer this, is that the numbers that were listed in criteria, sub-criteria 1A for this particular one, are those for the full county, or are those for the portion of buildings that are in the unincorporated area?
Good question, Mick. My understanding is that those emissions are in the unincorporated Ventura County.
Okay, so if we get clarification as it comes back, it's clear to me about the county buildings one, that was strictly the contribution for county buildings. So I just want to get a sense of what that is as it comes back. Also, the fact that building owner, it was highlighted in your building owners may change, so their desire to participate in a voluntary program may wane or vary over time. There are retrofitting expenses and maybe having guidance. So you sort of touched on it in your discussion of it, but being able to say, this is how much normal replacement costs and maintenance costs are for certain things, and then counterbalancing how much that the expected upgrades and or maintenance costs of those things for electrification helps to identify how much of an actual cost it turns out for pursuit of a program like this. So something like that as part of the criteria can really help, I think, to bolster both of these items.
Let me respond quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lose my train of thought. Again, good point. Yeah, I wish we could say with certainty the cost to retrofit all the buildings in the unincorporated county with electricity and get rid of the natural gas combustion. But I think that's why we need the staff in the county to put together this program to tackle this, because it's not currently in the climate action plan. It's a piece of what the county could do to achieve goals, and to have the staff to bolster what Erica and Alejandra are already doing to answer those questions in detail.
Completely agree. I think if there could, as this comes back with a criteria, if there can be something that sort of says, an average building has so much, whatever the costs of replacement parts or maintenance might be, and an average retrofitting might be this much, so it might be only 10% increase above maintenance costs. Anything like that, I think, could be helpful in bolstering it. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be directionally correct to get an understanding of whether it's truly feasible or not. For the criterion 1B on each of these, when it meant generally, and this is my recollection of what we put together, that rate of delivery really reflected about how quickly the impacts of the program would actually be realized, not necessarily whether it would go into effect immediately if the board passed a resolution. So in an example would be, if the program were actually implemented, we had, here's how much the cost would be, here's how much we would actually see in reductions on average. We start with some numbers of what the denominator might be, and we could probably have some understanding if you fully electrified a building, what the reductions would turn out to be. How many buildings would have to be done by 2030 to achieve those goals, and that is the rate of delivery of what that would be. Meaning that if those goals are set in the program set up in a way to where it does achieve the goals, this is the rate of delivery. That's the intent of that particular criteria.
I just want to retort that, that's asking a lot to do a complete economic analysis of how to get there. And I think what's being proposed here is to bolster staff to tackle this problem, in other words, emissions from buildings, and develop that. For our council to do this research and do a complete economic study is.
I disagree.
Yeah.
I mean, I really do. And the reason is that if we have a number of what we think the emissions are now, how many buildings are contributing to that? What would be the result if you fully retrofitted a building to be able to say, it would actually reduce it by 90%. If that's the case, we ought to know that. And if we knew that if we make that assumption that for every building it's retrofitted, it does 90%, and we did 60 or 40% of the buildings by 2030, we achieve our goals. And that's how we actually get there. We don't need a full economic study to do that. We just need something to give us a sense that if we pursue the program, it will actually work as designed. And that's kind of the intent there. So I think just a little bit of extra quantification would really help.
Okay.
And I think in general, those are the main comments, I think, on all of it. I think this seems like it's a very worthwhile thing to add to the policy statements in here, and just that sense of understanding of how effective it would be. And if we can get some sense of that, I think it could really be helpful. And this seems to me like something that could be added in between now and the next meeting. I really don't think it's overly intensive to get to some of these. That's my initial take. Hopefully it's viewed as.
Thank you very much. Good comment.
Yes, so Councilmember Ramirez.
Well, going to building on quantifying the piece, I wonder, since we have Erica on here, if you could help us with this piece, because, for example, let's just say I were to fill out that form for a county building. Could that analysis be done for a county building to see what would be the cost and the benefit, or how much savings of emissions would occur? And so then could that then be multiplied for, say, all the county buildings?
3C Ren, because we don't work in the public or commercial sector, we won't have specific numbers for projects. But I do think, to Mick's point, there are some high level numbers that we do know about, what percentage of emissions come from electricity versus gas. I'm happy to share what data we have.
So from that, we can extrapolate then for these two proposals.
So I wonder if by the next meeting, if Bill and I'm willing to help as well, and maybe Maggie and Mick, we can get together to talk about bringing something, or I can step off because I know it should be 4 people. If there's somebody else who wants to step forward, who would like to talk to bring this to a deeper level for the resolution.
So the way I see it right now is this just a draft. And so it's going to be presented to us so that we could get some clarity, ask some questions, make some recommendations before it comes back.
Yeah, no, I know,
So
I know.
that's what we're doing
I'm
right
very
now.
action oriented. So it's like,
I-
all right, so
I
now to
know,
move it to that
yes.
next level.
I
I
hear
already
you.
hear the voices of expertise that are floating to the top.
Yeah,
So I just want to gather it together so that it can happen.
yeah, I hear you. I just want to make sure that we abide by what's on the agenda. Yeah, thanks. Anything else? Any other questions from council members for this? Any other comments? All right. So then with this, it was just review and discuss. And so there's, further things that need to be collected as the team goes back and looks at this, at revising and updating them, these drafts. But thanks for the good work there, Councilmember White. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll revise and work on it and bring it back.
And if there's any other points that folks may want to do, is that send them over to Clay, and then he can redistribute them the information. Super.
Exactly. Anyone that's got comments on these agenda items and proposals, I can make sure that they make their way over to the other issues TAC.
Okay. So we're approaching here 10 minutes past the hour, past 2 o'clock. We still have one more item, and that's 21 on the agenda. Councilmember comments and future agenda items. So are there any folks on this council who'd like to make comments and or suggest for a future agenda item? So yes, go ahead, Councilmember Ferris.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I actually think that the discussion we just had about the 2 items is a good template for us on how people can go and do the work and kind of think it through, provide us the opportunity to be able to provide that feedback and be able to then come back with a really well-rounded proposal to be able to do that. And to the extent we can have our functioning either tax or whatever that those items are to help facilitate more of that, I think would really be beneficial for the activities of the council. So
very good. So noted. Any other comments from council members? All right, so let me go ahead and say this, that I'd like to put on the future agenda, the item that was just discussed with reviewing the temporary advisory committees and taking a look at what they're formed as, what we need to abide by in terms of the bylaws, if there's any bylaw changes that we want to make, et cetera, but that this would come back to us on a future agenda. I would suggest maybe next month if we don't have any larger discussions. Yes, Councilmember White.
I just want to suggest that we also discuss how long our meetings last. I know that we struggle to get through, to finish up within 2 hours. And so, I mean, we're meeting 24 hours a year the way we are. And maybe we ought to extend the length of our meetings and talk about that at a future meeting.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or suggestions? All right, so we get to item number 22, and this would be adjournment of our meeting. Our next scheduled meeting is, I believe, May the 17th of 2022. And Clay would make available any of the related items from here for our group. I think we have 3 C-REN presentation coming to us. And any further information would be available. All right, with that, then let's go ahead and adjourn. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great rest of your day and week. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Good meeting.
Thank you, everyone.
Sylvia.
Thanks.